Have you ever wondered what would happen if a major country decided to shake up decades of diplomatic tradition with a bold move no one saw coming? In a move that has surprised many, Canada is stepping back into the ring of trade discussions with Cuba. Yes, you heard that right. While debates rage elsewhere, Canada is busy shaking hands with the island nation just south of Florida. This initiative marks a major shift in diplomatic relations, as Canada looks to strengthen economic ties with Cuba, a nation long under the shadow of U.S. sanctions. But what does this mean for both nations? For Canada, it's an opportunity to diversify its trade portfolio and tap into Cuba's emerging markets. For Cuba, it's a chance to bolster its economy and attract investment. It's a win-win scenario, with a side of rum and cigars. As we dive deeper, we'll explore the geopolitical dynamics at play. Why is Canada making this move now? What are the implications for U.S.-Cuba relations? And how might this affect everyday Canadians? Grab your favorite drink, sit back, and let's unravel this intriguing trade tale. To truly understand Canada's move to reopen trade talks with Cuba, we need a quick trip down memory lane. Historically, Canada and Cuba have maintained relatively friendly relations, especially compared to Cuba's rocky ties with the United States. Since the Cuban Revolution in 1959, Canada has been one of the few nations to maintain diplomatic ties with Cuba, often acting as a bridge between the island and the rest of the world. Trade relations once flourished, with Canada exporting agricultural goods and machinery, while Cuba provided sugar and nickel. However, U.S. policies, especially the embargo imposed in the 1960s, cast a long shadow over North American relations. While the U.S. distanced itself, Canada leaned in, nurturing a unique partnership that has persisted through decades of tension. Fast forward to today, and Canada's renewed interest is far more than nostalgic. It's a strategic move in a rapidly shifting global landscape. With the U.S. still entangled in complex policies toward Cuba, Canada's step could reshape regional dynamics, offering economic opportunities while challenging the norm. This is a pivotal moment that could redefine relationships across North America and beyond. Canada and Cuba have maintained steady trade relations for decades, but in 2025, those ties are set to grow even stronger. As both nations celebrate 80 years of diplomatic relations, fresh opportunities are emerging, fueling investments, trade expansions, and deeper collaboration. Canada remains one of Cuba's most critical economic partners. Cuba is Canada's second-largest export market in the Caribbean and Central America, while Canada is one of Cuba's top 3 trading partners globally. This solid trade foundation is paving the way for greater economic growth. Several factors are driving trade ties to new heights. 80 years of diplomatic relations. This milestone isn't just symbolic. It opens doors for trade deals, business exchanges, and stronger cooperation. Government support. Canadian institutions like Export Development Canada, EDC, and the Canadian Commercial Corporation, CCC, are actively helping businesses, providing financing, insurance, and advisory services to expand into Cuba. Major investments in key sectors. Canada is heavily involved in Cuban tourism, mining, and energy. Canadian tourists dominate visitor numbers, and Canadian mining firms are strengthening their presence in Cuba's resource industries. Balanced trade growth. While Canada's economy is larger, both nations benefit from a steady, balanced exchange of goods and services. High-level talks and diplomacy. Ongoing meetings between government officials show both sides are committed to a long-term, successful trade relationship. Challenges, of course, remain. The U.S. embargo on Cuba continues to limit financial transactions and complicate trade. But Canada's independent foreign policy has allowed it to sidestep these barriers, maintaining and now expanding economic ties with Cuba. Looking ahead, opportunities are growing in renewable energy, infrastructure, and supply chain improvements, potentially propelling Canada-Cuba trade to new heights. Canada's decision to reopen trade talks with Cuba is anything but casual. It's a strategic move fueled by several factors. First, the economic benefits are compelling. Engaging with Cuba gives Canadian businesses access to a largely untapped market. Sectors like agriculture, tourism, and renewable energy could see major boosts. But beyond economics, there's a diplomatic edge. Canada positions itself as a progressive player, willing to engage where others hesitate. In a world often dominated by sanctions and isolation, Canada's approach champions dialogue and opportunity. However, risks exist. Some critics argue that strengthening ties with Cuba could provoke backlash, particularly from the United States or allies wary of Cuba's political climate. There are also legitimate concerns about human rights issues within Cuba that could complicate relations. Yet the potential rewards, economic growth, diplomatic influence, and a more stable regional environment, may outweigh the risks. As Canada steps forward, the world will be watching closely. Canada's renewed trade talks with Cuba also raise questions about how the United States might react. Historically, the U.S. has approached Cuba with caution, viewing any engagement with skepticism. Canada's move could trigger political tensions that impact broader U.S. Canada relations. Imagine two neighbors, one reaching across the fence, while the other insists on keeping it locked tight. It's awkward, at best, tense, at worst. The U.S. might respond in several ways. It could issue diplomatic protests, reaffirming its long-standing embargo and isolating stance. Or, it could take a more strategic approach, working with Canada to find common ground, perhaps easing tensions through dialogue rather than confrontation. Either way, Canada's move could inspire others to rethink their own policies toward Cuba. If trade deals blossom and economic benefits become clear, it might be harder for the U.S. to maintain the same level of isolation. In this evolving landscape, Canada could emerge as a catalyst for broader change, or find itself navigating choppy political waters. The next few years will reveal just how high the stakes really are. Canada's trade talks with Cuba could have major ripple effects across North America. By engaging with Cuba, Canada challenges the traditional power structures shaped largely by U.S. influence. This move could encourage other North American countries, such as Mexico, to reassess their own trade strategies and diplomatic relationships. Countries across the Caribbean and Latin America may see Canada's move as an invitation to strengthen ties with Cuba, creating a ripple effect of renewed cooperation across the region. Such developments could shift North America from a U.S.-centric model toward a more balanced, cooperative approach. Imagine a new network of partnerships promoting economic stability, innovation, and shared prosperity across the hemisphere. Of course, not everyone will welcome these changes. There will be pushback from those clinging to traditional alliances and old policies. But change is coming, and Canada is helping to lead the way. Sometimes geopolitics feels like a high-stakes game of chess, but with way more drama and far fewer rules. Take Canada's trade talks with Cuba, for example. It's like seeing your mild-mannered neighbor suddenly host a lively block party, while the grumpy neighbor next door nervously peeks through the blinds. Who knew Canada had such flair for shaking things up? International relations often play out like a soap opera. Remember when the U.S. tried for decades to isolate Cuba, only for Canada to extend a friendly hand? It's almost as if Canada is saying, hey, let's keep things light. How about some trade and maybe a few cigars? As we wrap up today's discussion, remember this. Trade, politics, and diplomacy aren't just headlines. They're the invisible forces shaping our everyday lives, from the goods on our shelves to the alliances that keep the world turning. With that said, thanks for watching, and until next time.